I've taken apart this VCR. It was one of the later ones to see if there's any useful parts that I might be able to use it for other projects. Now these later ones had some parts, but they'd almost completely gone to high chip count, and the mechanical parts were much smaller. The 1980s ones were much more fun to take apart because there were all sorts of individual components that you could use for many different projects. Now you just have some rubber capstans. This reed head is nicely polished metal, but I don't think there's a whole lot of uses that you could find for them. Here's some metal parts. Over here you have a transformer, high frequency transformer that might be useful for something. The electrolytics are probably shot. Here's another transformer that could be used for something. A few individual transistors, electrolytics, tantalums. Here is a electronic tuning module. Might be useful for making an oscillator or something. These are tuned with a voltage, and you could use it as a receiver, or usually, at least in the older ones, there was a place where you could take off the oscillator, one of the oscillator frequencies, and use that as signal generator. There's a few parts underneath this metal holder for the VCR tape that might be useful, but I can't see them. Here is a bunch of there's some fine metal gears there. Let's see here. There's underneath there, you can't see them. There's a gear assembly with a pivoting mechanism. Maybe it could be useful for something if you're into robotics. There are a couple of motors in here. I think here's a motor. Here's a motor. I don't know if that is the main motor. It's the only one I can see here. And there's probably a motor driving chip. This might be the motor driving chip. That could be useful. That might be a rectifier, I'm not too sure. And this here is a power resistor, that could be useful. Here is probably the protection device, a metal oxide varistor. And over here, you can't see it, right over here are what you'd call I believe they're capacitors that go across the line. The name escapes me what they're called. So here's a power resistor, 5 watts probably, maybe a little bit bigger. And here I think is probably a power transistor. I don't know if there's any switches in there that would be useful in the front. It doesn't look like it, but we can always look. Compared to the way these used to be in the 80s, which were marvels of engineering and beautifully made, with lots and lots of gears and pulleys and belts, this one is very uninteresting really inside. It doesn't have many useful parts. I kind of wonder if that motor drives everything. Might be a belt. It doesn't feel like that reading head is on a belt, but you never know it. No, it doesn't look like it. There might be a motor underneath there, I'm not too sure. You know, this here might be the motor itself. Yeah, this could be very well be the motor and the motor drive itself for the reading head. It's kind of interesting. And this is just getting the signal from a motor drive chip. Be interesting to know if this could be used separately as some kind of a motor to drive maybe parts of a robot. But you need to figure out what kind of a signal is coming into here from the microprocessor, which probably underneath here. I don't think that's a microprocessor, that one up there. I think that's that one there. I don't think that's a microprocessor. I think that's one of a motor drive chip. Looking at the number of pins on here, there's at least 32 on there. That's probably the microprocessor that drives the reading head, and probably has something to do with reading it too, reading the signal. So I think this is the erase head. So here, the more salvageable parts, compare this to a 1980s VCR. When they went bad and were too expensive to fix, you had lots and lots of parts. So here, you're quite limited in the number of parts, but there's still some. I mean, there's some transistors there. I don't know if they are just basic transistors or they have specialized functions. Maybe some Zeniths. That one there's a fairly hefty diode. That's reasonably hefty. And a switching power transformer. They're always useful. You can always make switching power supplies of them. This is probably a MOSFET. A couple of plastic capacitors in there. Oh, there's a couple of right over here. I think those are coils. Those are always useful. Inductors. There's another diode. Another plastic capacitor. But as I said, compared to the way they were in the 1980s, there's no comparison. From the 1980s VCRs with all the discrete parts and everything, you could make 10 other things. This one's quite limited. But anyway, it's interesting to open it up and look at it. Probably isn't even worth stripping for parts. If it works, it might be worth selling or just using again. I haven't tested this one out. A friend just had it in his storage, so he just gave it to me and said, here, if there's anything useful you can find in it. So anyway, so I'm going to see if this works. So that will give me an idea. If it doesn't work, then I'll strip it for parts. But if it works, I kind of hate to do it. So let's see what happens. So let's hit play here. Yeah, it seems to work fine. So I kind of hate to take apart something that works and waste it. I still have an old NTSC television, and I've got a converter. It converts either way. I could look at it on a digital TV too. So what I've got here is a working VCR. So why waste it? It might be worth something one day. And I've got a few VCR tapes, so might as well hang on to it working. Don't strip it. I got lots of other parts. Let's see. Reject. Eject. Been so long since I've used one of these. No, it's channel. Stop, eject. There we are. Eject. Yeah, so all the mechanisms work. And it's so clean inside that I would assume there was nothing wrong with it. Probably works perfectly good, probably puts out a nice clean signal, so I'm not going to strip this for parts.